So welcome everyone to this hackathon on moving away from legacy IT in healthcare. I'm Eleanor Harwich, Director of Research at Reform, and I am delighted to see so many of you today. For those of you who don't know Reform, we are a public services think tank that focuses our events and research program on finding ways to improve public services for everyone. And I would also like to thank AWS for supporting this hackathon today. So for those of you who've never attended a policy hackathon, I'll say a few words about the event format before saying a few words actually about the event theme. So the event really is meant to be a hackathon in spirit, minus the cans of Red Bull and sleeping bags, which means that you will all be split into smaller groups and given a set of problems to hack in a time-limited fashion. The idea really here is to generate as many tangible solutions as possible within a kind of time constraint. So the hackathon is really about getting those creative solution-focused juices going. We will then compile together all of the results of this hackathon into a post-event publication, which will be freely available on our website at the end of the month. So why this event and why this topic? I'm hoping that one thing that we will all share in common in this virtual room is a passion for helping the public sector and healthcare in particular to work better. The benefits of using technology in healthcare are undeniable, with some incredible advances at the cutting edge of technology. So for example, in medical imaging with the early diagnosing of certain conditions using the tech, which is everyone's favorite buzzword of AI. However, applying and scaling these cutting edge technologies or even making simple use of data in healthcare to better do population management or effectively manage the supply chain of medical equipment is often hampered by the prevalence of legacy IT. Governments have known this for a while, and it's been slightly over a decade actually now that the problem of legacy IT has been consistently mentioned in public sector transformation plans. This theme was also taken up by Matt Hancock's Tech Vision for the NHS, where he stated that the NHS is actually the world's most frustrating place to work because of its clunky IT and old IT. I think this pandemic has definitely served as a crucial reminder of the importance of being able to share accurate near to real-time information. And convening this hackathon really serves as a perfect platform to have a solution-focused conversation to problems that have unfortunately too often had a kick the can down the road approach. It will give, I think, the opportunity for us to use our collective brain power to find solutions to the real challenges that individuals face on the ground. But before we split into our respective breakout sessions, we will hear from our two speakers. So Wendy Clark, who is Chief Digital Information Officer at NHS Blood and Transplant, and Tom Allen, who is the AWS NHS lead. So Wendy is going to share with us the really interesting journey that NHS Blood and Transplant is going through and has taken to move away from legacy IT. And then Tom will respond by highlighting what his experience has been of legacy IT issues in the NHS. So Wendy, I will now pass on to you.
Great, thanks very much for the introduction. Hi everybody, I'm Wendy Clark. I'm the Chief Digital and Information Officer of NHS Blood and Transplant. And also in my spare time, I happen to be the Chair of Breast Cancer UK. So I've got 10 minutes and I think the idea is I whip you up into some sort of frenzy of excitement about the topic of legacy IT before the hackathon starts. So there's 4 things that I will cover very quickly. I'll just give a tiny bit of background about me. Then I'll talk a little bit about the context around the legacy challenge at NHSBT. I'll move on to the first attempt to move off legacy, which I call the bold, ambitious, sexy strategy. And then I'll talk about the current strategy, which I'm determined will be the final attempt. And that's more of the boring sort of hard work strategy. So a little bit about me. I've worked 29 years in tech, 11 in public sector, of which 2.5 are in health. So I'm not claiming to be any sort of expert in legacy in health. The legacy challenges that I've worked on in my career, though, have all been in the public sector. And most of them have been around systems that are kind of 20 plus years old, with some of them around systems getting to the end of that kind of 7 years sort of mark. The thing that they've always had in common are their systems that are a bit like an octopus or like a spider at the center of a web. They've grown up over time. They've developed more tentacles and integrations than people probably ever envisaged they were going to have. And many of those integrations have been done on a point-to-point basis using different design patterns, and are quite often the product of people wanting to do things fast and get new capabilities and never clearing up after themselves. So really quite knotty problems. I remember telling someone I was applying for this job at NHSBT, and they sort of did some sucking of teeth and said, "Oh, are you sure you want to do that, Wendy? You know, they've got some pretty hard engineering problems there, and they've also failed to eradicate them once." But little did they know that actually I love a challenge like that, because what you're taking is what quite often is a tricky engineering problem. It's aligned to a very strategic issue that you're trying to resolve, and there's usually a lot of business change associated with it as well. So, you know, for me, that was a real attraction to doing this job. And I think people often talk about leaving a legacy. For CIOs, my observation might be that quite often it's leaving the legacy behind and not dealing with it. So I think my philosophy very much is that you have to ditch the legacy if you're going to leave a real legacy as a CIO. So the challenge that we have at NHS Blood and Transplant is related to the blood supply system, which is the system that supports the collection, manufacturing and distribution of blood to all hospitals across England on a daily basis. Now, before I say anything else, I want to let you know this is a highly stable and reliable system, and it does its job well. You don't have anything to worry about from that perspective, but it is 20 plus years old, and its architecture does hold us back. A little bit about the sort of tech stack that sits behind it. It sits on some Itanium servers that had reached the end of their life. We have a shared servers and storage environment that's 7+ years old. There's a MIMR database, for those of you who know what MIMR is. The system consists of about 80 apps, and it's coded in Delphi. There are many, many, many point-to-point integrations, and it's the master data source for everything we do around blood collection, manufacturing and distribution. It also takes an age to change. I won't even tell you how long it takes at the moment to change, because it's kind of embarrassing. On the bright side, we own this system. We own the code, we own the IP, and we have a long-term partner that we've worked with for many years to develop it. There are other systems out there very specifically for blood supply, but you know, it's similar to our current situation. They are quite monolithic systems. They're closed. The data is held hostage, if you like, and you can't access that very often through APIs. And the systems are all owned by commercial suppliers. So we're in a slightly different position to our international partners because we own and manage our own system. So that's the kind of context around the legacy challenge that we have. The first attempt, the one that I would say the bold and sexy strategy, is one that in some ways the strategy was kind of the dream. You know, it aligns with everything that you've heard about what we should be doing, you know, everything that's best practice. We were going to jump straight to a cloud hosted solution. We were going to utilize commercial packages, Dynamics ERP, Dynamics CRM, etc. We were working with brand new suppliers, and that was going to be great for us because they weren't going to get bogged down in our old ways of thinking. They were going to come in with their can-do attitudes and their agile approaches, and that was going to help us be successful. We were going to do a one-step transition. Let's get off this old infrastructure once and for all. We don't want to make this investment again. And in doing all of that, let's take the opportunity to re-engineer our 20+ years worth of processes that have been specifically developed in this system for running what is a very specialized business. It's the dream, isn't it, if you can achieve all of that? But unfortunately, it did turn out to be a bit of a dream. You know, we're dealing here with a kind of 20+-year-old octopus, you know, that's found its way into integrating with everything and many other systems across the organization. There was a business actually that neither wanted nor needed its processes re-engineered. So to enter into that type of activity was a massive undertaking. Our new can-do partners were great. They had that attitude, they weren't bogged down by things of the past, but they didn't understand the blood business, which again, as I said before, is quite a niche business. The existing partners that we worked with and the staff who worked on these legacy systems didn't feel valued, and they didn't feel part of the future because they had the message that these systems aren't going to exist anymore. We won't have this infrastructure. We won't need you. And many of them left. So 3 years later, the program was stopped and the full investment was written off. And there was very little actually delivered into a live environment in that time. And even worse than that, even worse than the money being written off, there were 3 years worth of additional risk that was added to the existing systems, because those systems were 3 years older, and there'd been during that period a kind of halt on making improvements to the systems that were going to be replaced for very, very, very obvious reasons. Now, I will just add one caveat and say I didn't work for NHS Blood and Transplant at that time. So this is my interpretation as someone who joined the organisation in January, looking back and understanding what happened in that first attempt. So now we have a new strategy, and this is the one that I would say that aspects of the dream are still the same. It's still probably the same place that we're going to get to over time. It's just that we're not going to get there in one step. We're going to have to put in a lot more hard work and work through a strategy that allows us to mitigate the risks as we go, and also meet the business's need for transformation, and respect and recognize where they don't need transformation and they cannot absorb that transformation at the moment. And we'll be working towards sustainable capabilities for the future. So what is this new strategy? It's fairly straightforward. We have looked at the legacy infrastructure, and this year we've replaced the Itanium servers, and we've replaced and are migrating to a new shared server and storage environment. That buys us kind of 5 years of infrastructure stability. We've started rewriting the application. We're going to stick with the application that we've got, or the system that we have, these 80 applications. We're rewriting it from Delphi into C#. Whilst we rewrite the application, we're making it cloud ready. We will not be investing in infrastructure again. The next step will be moving this system to the cloud. We're opening the system up. We're liberating the data through APIs. And we're reducing the size of the octopus, basically. So this system will only be used for what it needs to be used for. And other capabilities that we need, we will build around the system using CRM tools, marketing platforms, anything that we need to add into that ecosystem. And we're building a sustainable product center to run this system that includes a mix of suppliers and permanent staff that will make sure that we as a business have the skills, capabilities to run this system out into the future and be able to further develop it. So we'll be more in charge of our own destiny. And then we'll look at what we need to do next, So, this type of modernization never stops. And part of the problem, I think, is that people look at these investments and think it's a one-off investment, we'll stop. And then we start stacking up lots of debt. So it's a long journey, it's a challenging one. And whilst we do all of this, we've got to continue to build lots of new capabilities, because we're a dynamic and growing organization, and we are consistently starting up new products. This last year, for example, convalescent plasma has been a new product line that we have been doing through the pandemic. So, whilst it's challenging, the other thing that we're lucky with, because I think, a problem for organizations, if all you can spend your money on is modernizing legacy, that's a real problem, isn't it? But we're lucky enough to also be able to invest in new, exciting capabilities. So we're launching a new donor app, a new donor portal. We're doing work so that we're able to look at our interactions with donors in a different way, get a 360-degree view of them, which allows us to personalize experience and so on. So we've got lots of good and exciting things happening. At the same time, we've got this modernization journey happening. And I think that allows us to satisfy our board and the rest of the executive team that we're still adding value through technology. So that is our story, and we are partway through it. And I really hope that sometime, if I'm ever speaking on this again in the future, I'll be able to be telling you how successful we've been, and that this time we've used the right strategy. So thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you very much. And I hope that too for you. So now, Tom, just for your response.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, thanks, Ellie. Thanks, Wendy, as well for sharing that. It's a very interesting tale, and I think there's probably experiences there that others on the group will have experienced to some degree. So, so you got me for a few minutes. So, just as a bit of a way of introduction, so as Ellie said, I lead the team at AWS that engages with our NHS customers. So, I've been around in and around health tech for about 15 years. In that time, I've worked across secondary care, primary care, integrated care systems more latterly, and mental health. And during that time, I've had the opportunity to sit in the audience where someone's giving a talk and drawing parallels between healthcare and financial services or the travel industry as a way of highlighting how far behind we are in terms of adopting digital technologies as a way of transforming the way our services are delivered. And I think, just to make the point, that's not really exclusively NHS. That's I've seen that happen around the world. I think in some respects, it's a fair point and a fair criticism. Healthcare, health services, as we know, are incredibly precious, and the value they bring to the patients. The patients deserve to be able to enjoy some of those benefits. The people that work in healthcare deserve to have the opportunity of some of the weight lifted from them, courtesy of technology. And as a taxpayer, I think we all would like to see that the money's been spent as efficiently as possible. I think the points that Wendy made there is that it's not that simple just to, for a number of the reasons that Wendy talked about. The stakes are certainly higher. We're dealing with people who are affecting the quality of the time they spend on the planet, and the costs of getting this wrong are pretty dire. It's also, complexities are an order of magnitude greater than some of those other industries. I think, again, Wendy highlighted just what the challenges are in unpicking what's already there. I think factoring that healthcare itself is incredibly complex. Not only do you have a vast array of illnesses and conditions, and I'm no clinician, so I'm taking a leap of faith there, but you also have a broad range of therapies and medicines to match to those diseases. And we know that long-term conditions very rarely travel alone. So you have that additional layer of complexity of multi-morbidities to deal with. So I think kind of the message that I'm trying to get across here is that the healthcare is a bit different. It is in liberating yourself from legacy systems can be more challenging. But I think in there, the fact that we're having this conversation highlights that the NHS and the people within it and the people that it serves deserves to have the benefits of digital technologies in the way that we see in other industries. I think the interesting thing we have from an AWS perspective is that we've had front row seats on the journeys of many organizations many organizations have gone down this journey in the past. We've supported probably thousands, if not millions, of organizations make that transition from kind of legacy technology to a newer way of working. And I think in that, we've seen a number of themes that are absolutely consistent across sectors. They're not and are not specific to certain sectors, but we see them again and again. And so what I wanted to leave you with was just sort of sharing those themes that may help to figure in the conversations you're about to have. So first off, we see that leadership, which is probably no great surprise, but leadership is absolutely key, and having leadership that's committed to this journey is absolutely essential. I think it's no great shock when we look at those NHS organisations that have made the greatest strides in this space are those that have digital people representing digital at a board level and are committed to it as a programme of work and really mean it. And we do see, this don't mean to sound like we're painting a stark picture here. We see some great innovations as we travel around the NHS. I noticed somebody who I was on a call with just last week with some really interesting work going on there around how technology can help change the way in which services are delivered. It's good to see him on the call today. The next one is around having an aggressive goal. So kind of a smart objective, if you like. But I think the important thing here is that it's both ambitious and explicit in the organisation. So having that in place helps to remove or negate any of the obstacles or opponents that you might face when actually trying to implement this change. And then the third one is around capabilities and actually having a workforce that that understands and is able to help to facilitate that journey at a pace that works. And I think we see from an AWS perspective in cloud is there's a real shortage of capabilities in that space, and that can be limiting to the pace of change. So actually enabling you or enabling the workforce to support that appropriately is one of the final points we'd make. And I think just to bring that to a close, I like to always weave in a couple of corny cliches if I can. So when we look at how to move this forward, I think the first one I'd say is that a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And the second one to layer on top of that is not to let perfect be the enemy of good. And kind of really the message here is start somewhere and iterate as you move forwards. But that's it for me. Thank you.